40% more. That couldn't be right. I stared at my monitor, the numbers refusing to make sense. No matter how many times I refreshed the screen, the compensation spreadsheet Kyle from HR had accidentally sent to the entire finance department instead of just the leadership team glowed on my display, each line more devastating than the last. Mason Reeves, 2 years with the company, base salary $137,000. Vanessa Lynn, 14 months at the company, base salary $134,500. Tristan Adler, 8 months here, base salary $142,000, every one of them trained by me. All of them earning nearly 40% more than my $98,750 salary after 9 years of building this company's entire financial infrastructure from the ground up. The office sounds faded around me. The clatter of keyboards, the quiet conversations, the hum of the air system that always ran too cold. I scrolled through the file again, my chest tightening when I found my name buried on page 3. Eleanor Avery, 9 years at the company, base salary $98,750. 9 years. Endless 60-hour weeks solving impossible calculations, catching mistakes no one else noticed, creating compliance systems that saved the company millions, training every single person who now made so much more than I did. I glanced across the open office at Mason, laughing at something on his screen, probably another crypto meme. Mason, who still asked me how to reconcile accounts payable even after 2 years on the job. Mason, who earned almost $40,000 more than me. The recall email from Kyle came 3 minutes later, but it was too late. I had already downloaded the spreadsheet and saved it to my personal drive. I closed my laptop and went straight to Daniel Hammond's office, my manager for 6 years. I didn't schedule a meeting, didn't message him, just knocked twice and walked in when he looked up. Eleanor, something urgent? He actually sounded irritated. I set my laptop on his desk, open to the spreadsheet. I need to understand this. My voice was calm but empty. Daniel's eyes flicked to the screen, then back to me. The slight widening of his pupils told me everything. He knew exactly what I'd found. He closed the laptop and leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. Eleanor, you know I can't discuss other employees' compensation. I'm not asking about theirs, I said, reopening the laptop. I'm asking about mine. 9 years, Daniel. 9 years building every financial system this company runs on. I trained all of these people who now make 40% more than me. How is that possible? He sighed. That particular sigh managers give, the one meant to make you feel like you're the unreasonable one, hung heavy in the air. The market has changed significantly since you were hired, Eleanor, Daniel said. It's company policy for new market entrants. Your compensation was set in a different economy. Then adjust it, I replied, keeping my tone even. It's not that simple. There are bans, structures, policies. He shrugged, actually shrugged. Take it or leave it. My hands trembled, but not from fear, something else entirely. I'd like to request a formal compensation review, I said, my voice steady. I can submit the request, he said, but honestly, it will be denied. We just completed annual reviews last quarter. You received your standard 3% increase. He checked his watch. Was there anything else? That night, I didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't call my sister Meredith to vent. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table, opened my laptop, and began to write. I'm Ellie, by the way, Eleanor Avery, 34 years old. The kind of person who alphabetizes her spice rack and color codes her closet. The kind of person always described as detail-oriented and thorough. Corporate code for will give you twice the work because you're too responsible to let anything fail. Let me pause for a second before going on. Could you drop a comment telling me where you're watching from? I'd love to know my story reached you, wherever you are. And if you've ever felt undervalued, maybe leave a heart, because what I'm about to tell you changed everything for me, and maybe it will for you too. So there I was, sitting at my kitchen table with a glass of grocery store Cabernet, creating the most important document of my career. I started with a timeline of my 9 years at the company. 2014, hired as financial analyst, Built the first automated reporting system that eliminated 30 hours of manual work weekly. 2015. Promoted to senior analyst, restructured accounts receivable, cutting outstanding collections by 42%. 2016. Created a tax compliance framework that passed a federal audit with 0 findings, the first clean audit in company history. I documented everything, every crisis I'd prevented, every dollar I'd saved, every system I'd built, every employee I'd trained who now earned more than me. I worked through the night, fueled by a cold, focused clarity I'd never known before. By dawn, I had finished a 43-page analysis titled "The Cost of Institutional Memory," a full breakdown of my value to the company. On the last page, I calculated exactly how much I'd saved them in the past year alone. $267,459. Compared to the $30,900 salary adjustment needed to match market rate, the math wasn't complicated. I printed the document and had it professionally bound at a 24-hour coffee shop. Then I went home, showered, and put on my best outfit, a charcoal pencil skirt and cream blouse I'd bought after my last promotion 3 years earlier. When I arrived at the office, I went straight to CEO Garrett Wilson's office. His assistant, Tara, wasn't there yet. It was only 7:15 a.m., so I slipped inside and placed 3 items neatly on his desk. My resignation letter, an offer letter from a competing firm offering $145,000 plus benefits, and my leather-bound analysis. Then I went to my desk and worked as if it were any other day. By 9:30, my phone rang. Garrett's extension. "Eleanor, could you come to my office, please?" His voice was tight. I took my time gathering my notebook and pen, walking deliberately across the office floor as whispers rippled around me. Word had spread about the spreadsheet. I didn't look at anyone. When I entered Garrett's office, I found not just him, but Daniel, Kyle from HR, and Vanessa Chen, the COO. My analysis lay open on Garrett's desk. "Close the door, please, Eleanor," Garrett said. At 57, he had the calm authority of someone who'd never been told no. I stayed standing even when he gestured to the chair. "We've reviewed your document," Garrett began, tapping the leather cover. "I have to say, it's quite thorough." "Thank you," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "There seems to be a misunderstanding about compensation that we should address," Kyle from HR added, beads of sweat glistening at his hairline. "No misunderstanding," I said evenly. "I've worked here 9 years. I've trained 5 employees who now earn significantly more than me. When I brought it up, I was told it was company policy. I'm simply making a business decision based on the information given." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "Eleanor, if you had given us time to review your request—" "I did," I interrupted. "For 9 years," I turned to Garrett. "The final section of my analysis includes a comprehensive knowledge transfer plan. Every process, contact, workaround, and system vulnerability that existed solely in my head, organized by department and impact. You'll find it quite detailed," I said evenly. Vanessa Chen, who had stayed silent until now, finally spoke. "You've clearly put significant thought into this, Eleanor." "I have." Garrett leaned forward. "What would it take for you to reconsider your resignation?" I had anticipated that question. My market value is already established by both your own pay structure and my competing offer. But this isn't just about money. It's about 9 years of being undervalued despite measurable contributions to this company's success. I paused, letting the silence grow uncomfortable. I'd need my salary adjusted to $150,000, retroactive compensation for the past year's disparity as a bonus, and a formal review of pay practices company-wide to correct similar inequities. Kyle actually gasped. Daniel stared at his shoes. Garrett studied me for a long moment. "You realize what you're asking for is highly unusual. So is building your entire financial infrastructure and training my own replacements at a 40% discount for 9 years. The clock on Garrett's wall ticked loudly in the heavy silence that followed. Outside the glass walls of his office, I could see people pretending not to watch. Finally, Garrett nodded. Give us 24 hours to prepare a formal response. I collected my notebook calmly. My resignation is effective in 2 weeks. The knowledge transfer plan I've outlined requires at least 60 days. You have 24 hours to decide whether that gap is worth addressing. As I turned to leave, Vanessa spoke again. Eleanor, just out of curiosity, who made you the competing offer? I paused at the door. Horizon Financial Solutions, I said. They're led by Catherine Walsh. I let that name linger in the air. Catherine Walsh, the same woman who'd left this very company 5 years ago after facing the same kind of treatment I had. The same Catherine Walsh who had since built a rival firm that had been poaching our biggest clients for 2 years. The look on their faces told me they finally understood exactly what they were about to lose. I walked back to my desk, heart pounding but steps steady. I could feel the shift in power vibrating around me like static. For the first time in 9 years, I wasn't just Eleanor, the dependable financial architect. I was Eleanor, a force to be reckoned with, and they knew it. As I sat down, my phone lit up with a message from Catherine. Did you do it? I typed back a single word, yes. Her reply came instantly. Their loss, our gain. Dinner tonight to celebrate. I smiled as I set my phone down. The real victory wasn't just standing up for myself after 9 years of being overlooked. It was what was coming next. Because the secret I hadn't included in my analysis was the most valuable of all. I looked around the office that had been my second home for almost a decade. The faint smell of burnt coffee from the break room. The uneven hum of the air conditioner. The view of the city skyline I'd watched grow year after year. All of it familiar, yet now completely different. My computer pinged with an incoming message. It was from Jordan in accounts receivable. What's happening? Everyone's saying you quit? News traveled fast in an office built for eavesdropping. I minimized the message without replying and opened the file I'd been quietly working on for months. Not my analysis, but something else entirely. When I said I'd documented everything in those 9 years, I meant everything. The first irregular transaction had caught my eye 18 months earlier. A vendor payment that didn't match any approved purchase order. Small enough to slip under the radar, $13,975 to a consulting firm I'd never heard of. I flagged it to Daniel, who dismissed it as pre-approved by executive leadership. She knows. That was the moment I realized Catherine had anticipated everything, down to the NDA. When I'd first met her 6 months ago, she didn't pitch me with money or titles. She'd said, "When you're ready to walk away, make sure you take the truth with you." I hadn't understood what she meant then. Now I did. The next morning I arrived early. The office was unusually quiet. The calm before a storm only I knew was coming. I uploaded my final documentation to both company and personal encrypted drives, making sure timestamps matched official access logs. Then I printed one copy. Not for them, for me. By noon, Thomas had emailed the NDA draft. I read every word slowly. Section 3B. The employee agrees to withhold disclosure of any financial discrepancies, accounting irregularities, or undocumented transactions observed during employment. There it was. The buried confession. They'd written it themselves. I replied simply, "Language under Section 3B requires clarification regarding legality of non-disclosure in cases of confirmed fraud. Please advise." 10 minutes later, Daniel appeared at my desk, sweating through his collar. "Garrett wants to see you." Of course he did. In the conference room, Garrett's patience had evaporated. "Eleanor, this phrasing, it's its standard. There's no need to escalate this." I kept my tone even. "Then legal should have no problem clarifying it." Thomas interjected, "This discussion is internal. No need to involve outside counsel." I closed my notebook deliberately. "Then I'll hold my signature until it is clarified." The silence that followed was electric. Garrett finally exhaled, "Take the afternoon off." "We'll revisit tomorrow." I stood, smiled faintly. "Thank you, I will." That evening, Catherine met me at a quiet restaurant 2 blocks from Horizon's office. She was already seated, wine glass in hand, that knowing smile on her face. They took the bait, didn't they? She asked. I nodded. They're scrambling to contain it. Good, she said softly. Then it's time. From her bag, she slid a thin folder across the table. Inside were Horizon's onboarding documents and a formal request from their legal team to provide expert testimony in an upcoming case involving financial misconduct at my former company. My heart pounded. You were never just an employee, Eleanor, Catherine said. You were the witness they never saw coming. I exhaled slowly, realizing this was more than a career move. It was justice, long overdue. The next morning, I submitted my official acceptance to Horizon and my formal resignation to Garrett, effective immediately. Attached was a single-page note addressed to the board. Attached are findings related to unverified vendor transactions spanning 3 fiscal years. Further details will be provided to federal investigators upon request. Then I powered down my workstation for the last time. As I walked out, the sunlight hit the glass walls just right, and for the first time, the reflection staring back at me wasn't the quiet, overworked architect they'd underestimated. It was the woman who had finally balanced the ledger. And in that moment, I knew they hadn't just lost their best analyst. They'd lost their shield and their silence. Proceed as planned. The next 2 weeks were fascinating. I was suddenly included in executive meetings I'd previously only prepared materials for. People who had barely nodded at me in the hallway now stopped to chat. Daniel brought me coffee, black, no sugar, just how I liked it, without being asked. I signed their revised offer letter but kept finding issues with the confidentiality agreement, sending it back to legal with questions that required careful wording, a delaying tactic Catherine had suggested. The document isn't legally problematic, I explained to my sister Meredith over dinner that weekend. I'm just buying time. Meredith shook her head, twirling pasta around her fork. I still can't believe you're doing this. The old Ellie would have just taken the money and been grateful. I set down my wine glass. The old Ellie let herself be undervalued for 9 years. The new Ellie understands her worth. And the new Ellie is kind of terrifying. Meredith laughed. I love it. For those wondering what happened, because I know you're wondering, let me be clear. I didn't break any laws. I didn't steal company secrets. I didn't sabotage systems. What I did was much more effective. On day 15, one day after my resignation would have taken effect, I sat across from Garrett, Daniel, Vanessa, and Thomas again. This time we were joined by Amara Jackson, chair of the board, connecting via video conference. Eleanor, thank you for your patience as we've worked through the details of your new role, Garrett began, smiling that CEO smile that never quite reached his eyes. Before we finalize everything, there's something I need to share with all of you, I said, pulling a slim folder from my bag. We've already approved your requests, Daniel interjected quickly. This isn't about my compensation. I opened the folder and distributed copies of a 15-page document to everyone at the table, sending the digital version to Amara. This is about the $2.7 million that's been systematically diverted from the company through fake vendor accounts over the past 3 years. The room went completely silent. On the screen, Amara leaned forward, eyes narrowing as she scanned the document. I have detailed the transaction patterns, the shell companies involved, and traced the funds to their final destination, I said calmly, professionally. I initially flagged these inconsistencies to Daniel 18 months ago, but was told they were approved at the executive level. All eyes turned to Daniel, whose face had gone ashen. There must be some mistake, he stammered. No mistake, I continued. I verified every transaction. The pattern became clear after tracking the first dozen payments. What wasn't clear was who was behind it. I turned to page 12 of my report. The money was carefully dispersed across 7 different LLC entities, all traced back to a holding company called Pinewood Ventures. I paused. A holding company registered to Thomas Whitaker's brother-in-law. Thomas's expression didn't change, but his knuckles went white as he gripped the table. This is absurd, he said evenly. I've never heard of Pinewood Ventures. Perhaps not by name, I agreed, but the signature authorizing the formation documents matches the signature on your marriage certificate to Claire Whitaker. Nay Peterson, your brother-in-law, Jordan Peterson, signed both. On the screen, Amara's voice cut through the tension. Ms. Avery, these are extremely serious allegations. Why bring this to us rather than the authorities? I met her gaze. Because I believe in giving this company the opportunity to address the situation internally first. The fraud has been sophisticated but contained. It appears to involve only a small number of individuals, not systemic corruption. What I didn't say was that Catherine had advised this approach. Let them think you're doing them a favor, she told me. Give them just enough rope to hang themselves. I'll need to call in our outside counsel, Amara said, already reaching for her phone. Thomas stood abruptly. This meeting is over until legal representation for all parties is present. Sit down, Thomas, Garrett said quietly, eyes never leaving the documents. Eleanor, how long have you been compiling this information? 18 months. Since the first time I reported an irregular payment and was ignored. Daniel looked like he might be sick. I didn't. You never asked questions, I finished for him. You never investigated when I raised concerns. You trusted the wrong people and dismissed the right ones. The next 8 hours were a blur. Emergency board calls, outside counsel arriving, security escorting Thomas from the building, and forensic accountants being brought in. I answered questions calmly, provided all my documentation, and watched as the company I'd devoted 9 years to grappled with the betrayal of its trusted legal counsel. By midnight, it was clear. Thomas had been the architect of the scheme, with 2 accomplices in the accounting department who had helped process the fraudulent payments. Daniel hadn't been complicit, just negligent and too trusting of Thomas, who had assured him the payments were legitimate, executive-approved consultancy fees. I left the building at 1:17 a.m., exhausted but eerily calm. Catherine was waiting in her car across the street. How did it go? She asked as I slid into the passenger seat. Exactly as you predicted. Thomas is finished. The board is in panic mode. Garrett and Vanessa are scrambling to contain the damage. Catherine smiled in the darkness. And you? I start as your new chief financial officer next month as agreed, with a signing bonus matching what they embezzled from their own company. I leaned back against the headrest. But first, I'm taking 3 weeks off. I haven't had a real vacation in 9 years. What happened after that? Well, that's when things got really interesting. The company tried to keep the embezzlement quiet, but these things have a way of getting out. Within days, Thomas and his accomplices were facing criminal charges. Daniel was placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation into his oversight failures. The board brought in an independent firm to conduct a complete audit of all financial systems. Systems I had built and knew inside and out. 2 days before I was set to start my new role at Catherine's company, Garrett called me personally. Eleanor, I'm hoping we can talk. His voice had lost that CEO confidence. The audit team is struggling with some of the systems you designed. They're finding it challenging to understand your methodology. I almost laughed. My methodology is fully documented in the knowledge transfer plan I provided, the one you ignored when you thought you could simply pay me to stay quiet. We're prepared to offer you a consulting fee to assist with the transition. Name your price. My price? I echoed. My price was being valued fairly for 9 years of loyalty and expertise. That opportunity had passed. I hung up and blocked his number. When I walked into Catherine's office on my first day as CFO, she greeted me with a glass of champagne. To new beginnings, she toasted. And to knowing your worth, I added. Within 6 months, we had secured 3 major clients who had left my former company due to concerns about their financial controls. Within a year, our firm had doubled in size and was recognized as an industry leader in transparent financial practices. I implemented a company-wide transparent compensation structure that ensured equal pay for equal work regardless of hire date. Every quarter, I personally reviewed salary data to identify and correct any emerging disparities. As for my former employer, they survived but never fully recovered from the scandal. Garrett was eventually removed by the board. Vanessa left for a position at a smaller firm. Daniel was demoted to a non-management role after the investigation concluded he had been negligent, but not criminal. The company was acquired 2 years later at a fraction of its previous valuation. Sometimes I wonder if things would have been different had they simply valued me properly from the beginning. If Daniel had investigated when I first raised concerns. If Garrett had built a culture of transparency rather than secrecy. But I don't wonder for long, because the truth is I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. So, if you're watching this and feeling undervalued, overlooked, or taken for granted, whether at work, in a relationship, or anywhere else in your life, remember my story. Remember that knowing your worth isn't selfish. It's necessary. Your institutional knowledge, your dedication, your skills, they all have value. Real, tangible value. And sometimes you have to be the one to calculate that value and present the bill. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe. Share in the comments if you've ever had to stand up for your worth. I read every comment and would love to hear your experiences. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, share this video with them. Because in the end, the most powerful thing you can do isn't seeking revenge. It's recognizing your true value and refusing to accept anything less.